Nothing stays the same forever, and life has ups and downs. Sometimes things don't go to plan, and sometimes things happen in people's lives unexpectedly. When you have a successful care team in place, it's important to think about what will happen when things do change for them or you.
Life doesn't always give us the opportunity to give notice of events which will cause changes in employment relationships, but it does give us the opportunity to do some what if thinking.
When I eventually end up living independently, it's going to be a whole nother world of organizing and sorting things out and having backups. But I'm really looking forward to moving out, though. To be fair, it really excites me.
At any time at short notice, your PAs might need to take sick leave, bereavement leave, or time off for family responsibilities.
It's always a good idea, I think, in the current employment climate, to have an agency that you have a good relationship with, so that if your team for some reason can't cover something, you can call on them. So I would advise people always to have that backup.
Make sure that whatever your backup plan is, it will give you the level of support that you need and keep you safe.
It's vital that there's no second choice or it'll do going on in the provision of support and assistance while your main employee isn't there.
Usually, someone who's worked with you before will be more able to hit the ground running.
I do have a network of other PAs who I've used on a number of occasions. Should someone not be able to turn up for a shift, there's a people I can call upon. I have a number of agencies I sort of have on the bank that I can go to.
If somebody calls in sick and I'm not got much warning, I might put a message on the WhatsApp, or I might just go, okay, I know that so-and-so is more likely to be available, so I will text them directly.
Think about whether you can keep some of the budget for bonuses or retainers, in recognition of the fact that you might call on your team when they're not scheduled to work.
I'm lucky that in the budget that I had or have, that there was an element of an on-call fee that I could put in place. The problem is I'm not fully staffed at the moment. So when people basically weren't at work, they were on call, which meant they were never off work. So that became a bit of a reluctance to be on call. So what we try and do is only have one person on holiday at one time so that there's sufficient other people.
The longer the same people work with you, the easier it can be to maintain a high standard of care and the more you can rely on them. However, the fewer people you have trained in your needs, the harder it can be to find good backup.
I have been incredibly fortunate on turnover that I have had one person work with me since 2007 and another person work with me since 2013. These two individuals form the backbone of my sort of PA team. There have also been times where yes, they've had to take breaks or something's happened.
It's a really tough one to master, and being really honest, I'm not sure there's a perfect solution. It boils back to budget and enough people. I think if you've got enough people and enough budget, you could have a good on-call rota.
Think long-term as well as short about how you'll solve problems and prevent greater ones.
What's my backup on a purely practical, personal, selfish level? What is my backup? Where is my support and assistance that day? Where are my needs met? But also maintaining the employment relationship. What is good practice here within my budget, within my resources, in order to maintain this relationship?
You have a duty of care towards your employees, which means that you have to treat them properly, essentially. But that's a bit of a no-brainer for people who are employing PAs, because if you treat them properly, they treat you properly. it becomes a symbiotic relationship.
You've got to have a relationship with people, treat these people how you would want to be treated, and there is an element of investing some time in them. Yes, they're here to support you and enable them, but they're not a second-class citizen.
By building respectful relationships with your PAs and treating them fairly, you'll establish loyalty and they'll be in a better position to help you when things get tough.
You want to make sure that the written agreement covers matters like what about when you go on holiday or have to go away for healthcare or anything like that. You know, whether you're skiing down a mountain or have an unexpected stay in hospital, what are you going to pay them?
Think about how you ask your PAs for extra help, as well as what you ask for and what you offer in return.
Mostly I communicate with my PAs by text. I prefer doing that because I'm concerned that if I phone them, I might be disturbing them in the middle of something. They're not actually working. So I don't have a call on their time when they're not actually working. So if I text them, they can read it when they're ready to read it.
The key thing to having things run smoothly and making it a nice place to work and a nice, a rewarding job is communication. I think that I've learned that is like the linchpin of everything. So I try and instill that from the beginning, that there should be open communication and that they feel comfortable asking questions, coming to me with any issues, that we could talk about things.
There's a real sense of being a good employer is about having a positive view of the people that you're employing. And that's really critical.
They are your enablers, and to enable them, they need to be happy, they need to be engaged, they need to feel comfortable.
Your team will feel more engaged if the work they're doing remains fresh and interesting. This can be a virtuous circle. The more different experiences you give them, the more engaged your team can be. And the better your team knows you and how to support you, the more you'll be enabled to take part in different activities.
I tried to communicate with them. I tried to involve them. I tried to vary it as well. So, it's some of my carers are really good at certain things, and I'd be lying if I said you didn't lean on them sometimes to do the things that they like doing and that you like them doing for you. But I do try and mix it up.
I think variety as well, because it may not seem it to me, but things can be repetitive. So it's nice that they have a varied sort of schedule for the day as well.
If you're employed yourself, think about the way your employer, the good employers you've worked for, have treated you.
Not everybody who has employees in their home has experience as a manager of people or a leader of people. You want to make sure that you think about training, because that will benefit them and you if your employees have training. You want to make sure that they have opportunities in their lives to grow, and that their relationship as your employee is one of those opportunities. Helps you keep people happy, helps maintain the happy workforce that you want.
As well as the things that happen day to day, you need to be prepared for major life events that affect your PA's availability, such as chronic or critical illness of a PA, their own family caring responsibilities, or their right to take parental leave. You need to have clear rules which meet the legal requirements for sick leave and parental leave, and for maternity leave within that for people who might give birth or adopt. From a practical point of view, whatever the reason behind a long-term absence, you need to ensure the continuation of your own care.
Have a plan in place for if it's possible that one of my staff could need parental leave unexpectedly within this year, what would I do? Who would step in? How would I find them if necessary? And am I sure I've got enough money left in the budget to deal with that?
Of course, even if employment relationships have been wholly successful and positive, they still come to an end. Hopefully, you'll be on good terms with all your PAs, so take some time to think about navigating the feelings around what is a natural part of the journey.
So sometimes, if you get quite close to one of your PAs, if they decide to leave, it can feel a bit personal, but it's not, because it's in the end, it's a job. And if they want to go and get another job, that's perfectly within their rights to do that.
If you both feel a bit sad about it, that's because you've done it really well. And yeah, I guess it's much better than them being relieved that you're leaving.
It's really hard. It is, having a PA is like having, sometimes it's like having it's like having a relationship without the relationship part of it. Or it's like a brother or a sister or a family member.
It has happened that PAs that have been with me for a fair while and have got to know me well, their circumstances might change and they will leave. When that first happened, I admit I did find that it did affect me. I was sort of thinking, worried about the terms they were leaving on, or it did make me feel a little bit unstable.
I wouldn't say there are many jobs in that sector as well where you feel like you're not going to be letting somebody down.
You might want a longer notice period than the standard for any of the template contracts, because it can be really hard to replace someone that you've built a working bond with and work closely with on a daily basis and trust with so many aspects of your life, including personal and sometimes intimate ones.
My employer had been some bumps in the recruitment process, and the end of the year had been difficult in some ways. And I think I remember that when I left feeling I think you do feel a little bit like you've not abandoned somebody, but there is a little bit of like, oh, I hope the next person's all right, and I hope things go well.
If people resign on good terms, there's no reason they can't, work their notice period. And hopefully, if you're successful in getting your advert out quick, they might be able to even help on board and train up the people that are coming in. It is really hard though when someone leaves. I think one of my carers actually says to me, don't take it so personally. And she's right, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't feel personal.
It was destabilising, but I think having a bigger care team now makes that slightly easier in that respect. But it is always hard when somebody leaves, because you've built up that relationship with them, that rapport, and yeah, it can feel like there's sort of something missing for a while. But everybody has their own life to get on with.
Open communication with your PAs throughout their employment with you can mean it's less of a shock when the time comes for someone to leave.
Having some expectation about when you're going to go, and having that agreed together stops the feeling that I think can be quite awkward especially when you're doing something so personal.
There's someone you might have spent, huge amounts of time with. They might have seen you in your darkest of times, your highest of times. They might have been to your wedding. They might have been on your honeymoon. Who knows where they've been with you? So it's really hard and it's scary as well, because generally if someone's been with you a long time, they're obviously very good and they can do what you need them to do.
It's probably going to take longer than a month to replace them. And the smaller the team of PAs you have, the longer the notice period you want it to be.
I felt very much like my employer had, had some investment in what I was going to do next, and had, shared that process with me and helped me along the way. And that, as much as I guess you hope that they're a bit sad to see you go because you hope you've done a good job,
there may be times when changes in your life, your needs, or your circumstances mean that you need to change the terms of employment for your PAs. You might even have to ask them to leave through no fault of their own.
One of the situations where any employer needs to tread a little bit carefully is when there's nothing wrong with the employee's work, but you just don't need them to do it anymore. And in law, that's called redundancy. People talk about being redundant or made redundant. It's never the person, it's the role. So you need to think about it in terms of roles. This role is no longer one that you need for whatever reason. Again, this is a situation where planning and checking your insurance policy and having some frank conversations and some clear ground rules in advance really helps.
Remember, if there's a problem with your PA's performance, then if you want to ask them to leave, you must go through the disciplinary and fair dismissal process. If you make a role redundant, then that's because the job doesn't exist anymore. So it wouldn't be legal to hire someone else to do similar tasks in a similar way. However, if the role is no longer what you need because your circumstances, your needs, or your budget have genuinely changed, you can go through the redundancy process and end some or all of your employment relationships.
If you encourage your employees to join a union, that can sound counterintuitive, but if you do, they'll manage it for you. So you can then have the support of being a good employer, a gold standard employer who accepts through prior planning that their life might change and their organizational needs in their home might change. So has talked it through with the appropriate parties in advance and come up with a plan.
Make use of the advice available from support agencies, not to mention your insurer, Skills for Care, and ACAS. All of these organisations have experience of the changes and uncertainties that you might face in the future, and they can help you prepare.
Be sort of kind and patient with yourself, in the sense that if you don't get it right first time round, like, it's okay, and it's not the end of the world, and not to beat yourself up too badly. I think in the early days I would get very stressed out and feel quite sad in myself if things were not working out. But over time you realize it is a learning process, it is a journey. Trying to understand what you need is complex, and actually what it does force you to is to sort of know yourself, right? And actually that takes time.
The formalities you'll need when preparing for change are an agency for emergency backup, a retainer policy for occasional times you don't need your PAs, a sickness policy, a parental leave policy, and a notice period that allows for recruitment of a replacement. You need to think about contingency plans, both immediate and long-term, agreements with your team about how and when they will be your backup, how you'll communicate when you need to ask for help in a crisis, how you'll structure the work to keep your team fresh and keep them from feeling overwhelmed, planning for unexpected long-term absence, how you'll take care of your own feelings when PAs leave, and how you would handle redundancies.